Dude,
Dude,
there's a new Fire Emblem coming out.
are you ready to engage with it?
Welcome to Mort's Garage. I'm here with my brother Matt. Sweet stash.
Thanks, bro.
I want to have Matt on because I'm a bit of a Fire Emblem fan, but I'm not like an expert. And we thought with Fire Emblem Engage coming out, it would be really cool to just get a high-level overview of the series. What is it? And I'm gonna go noob on this. Let's talk about just a little bit about what is Fire Emblem, what's the history of this series, when did it start?
Fire Emblem is a strategy RPG series developed by Nintendo and Intelligent Systems. The first game was developed for the Nintendo Entertainment System back in the early 90s. It was a Japan exclusive series for the first 6 games that came out. So the first game we got in America, our box just says Fire Emblem, but it's actually the 7th game in the series.
On the Switch, I believe that game did get a re-release. This is Shadow Dragon and Blade of Light. There's no physical copy of the game in here, but this has a downloadable code, and it's a remaster of the original NES version of the game, but with English language and all that kind of stuff. Have you played this version?
Yeah, I've played a little bit of it. It's kind of tough to go back to the NES with some of these games.
What makes it tough to go back to on the NES?
When you've played the modern, even the Game Boy Advance ones, these old ones can just feel a little slow, a little clunky. Not to get too into the weeds, but the item management is old, and Intelligent Systems has made a lot of progress since this game came out.
Has Intelligent Systems developed all of the Fire Emblem games?
They've partnered with other companies over the years, so Three Houses, the most recent one, was in partnership with Koei Tecmo, but they're the group in charge mostly.
So this series is exclusive to Japan, but why did it end up coming over here?
Intelligent Systems also developed Advance Wars, and the success of the first Advance Wars game, sales-wise in the West, ultimately is what convinced Intelligent Systems to believe that, hey, these Westerners, they might be able to hang with our tactics RPGs, so let's bring over Fire Emblem and see how it does.
A tactical RPG. How do you define the gameplay of that type of a genre?
It's an RPG in that you're leveling up characters, you're managing stats and items, there's potions.
Which sounds, when you hear that, just like, do I need an encyclopedia in order to play these games? Because that's one of the things that makes it tough to get into RPGs and JRPGs and tactical RPGs, is I feel like I am playing with stats way more than I'm playing the game sometimes, and also some of the characters and the tropes of it can just be really tough.
Well, I will say on that last point that this series can sometimes be playfully called anime chess. So you should just know that going into it.
Okay.
What's, I think, really brilliant about this series, and I think what really draws people to it, is a couple things. One, there are numbers, but they're simple. There's nothing greater than 2 digits in the number. So
that's helpful for me because I can't count past 99.
No, this is true. The gameplay is even, I would say, simpler in some ways, more complex than others, but basically you just take turns with the computer. You get to move all your units, make all your decisions, and then they make all their decisions. You take turns until the goal of each map is accomplished. Usually your objective is defeat all the enemies on the map, or seize the important point, or survive for 10 turns. Ultimately, your goals are simple, digestible. There's lots of deep lore if you're interested, but for the most part, the stories are told really simply through little conversational text boxes. We didn't have voice acting in this series till like 5 years ago, honestly.
Yeah. So there's a lot of resource management in some respects, but what you're saying that you like about the series is you feel it is communicable.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of the most important sort of RPG moments, your level ups, your items, it's all really simple. Like, your strength goes up by 1. You feel the impact of those changes in a way that's really narratively interesting, as opposed to, like, even something like Pokemon. When your Pokemon levels up, he gets 3 speed or whatever, but you don't really feel that difference in your Pokemon's ability.
Because Pokemon's terrible.
No one likes it.
Well, and also, it's terrible. One of the chief things about the gameplay of Fire Emblem that set it apart from other tactics games was the concept of permadeath. Talk about that a little bit.
Here's the thing about permadeath. It's not a big deal.
I get into a Fire Emblem game and I just feel stress from that. Like, it's all my fault because I don't know how to flank the bad guys.
So there's 2 reasons it's not a big deal. One is because you just gotta let go of those sunk costs, and you gotta let go of your loss aversion. That's just some human anxiety stuff, some human psychology that you've got to battle against. The second reason, I just held up 4 fingers. The second reason is these games are designed with the expectation that you will lose your units and you will still be able to beat the game and accomplish your goal. If the sort of gameplay narrative combination that you want to create is all of my guys made it to the end, then you can do that. And certainly I would never say you shouldn't play that way. Play games the way you want to play games. But the fear that I lost one of my horsemen and now I won't be able to beat the game or get the super rad item is just not really actually borne out in the gameplay. Intelligent Systems over the years has actually tried lots of different things to say or to experiment with how the player can react to losing their units and provide solutions for that in really interesting ways. Every game in every genre can have moments where you're like, what were they thinking? Yeah. But for the most part, there's a really clear intentionality to the way that these games are designed. And I really enjoy them. They're comfort food for me.
I love it.
So in the West, our first one is Fire Emblem 7, The Blazing Sword. The Blazing Sword is like a really brilliantly created intro to the series that also satisfies longtime fans with some of its more difficult settings. There's 3 great main characters that the story weaves through. It's really enjoyable gameplay. Okay. There's a tutorial that holds your hand in a way that says, here's everything you're going to need to know to master this game. And then after that tutorial, it says, go have a good time.
Would you say if I'm a new player, this is a good place to start?
Absolutely.
Okay, would you say that more than this game? This is the one that came after it, Fire Emblem The Sacred Stones.
I would say if you've never played a tactics RPG, play the other one first.
Okay.
If you've played Final Fantasy Tactics or Project Triangle Strategy, I might actually say come to this one. Mm-hmm. This one and some of the others have an open world as part of its design. Some Fire Emblem games have a very strict limited resource system. Mm-hmm. These ones let you go and grind and level up off the main course of the story.
And you would start there over any of the other games in the series?
Actually, honestly, either of this one or Fire Emblem 7 are the best choices.
Next game up is Fire Emblem Path of Radiance. This is one of the most expensive GameCube games. I think it's pushing around $200 at this point.
I love Fire Emblem Path of Radiance. I think it's the best story in the series, just in terms of narrative. It tackles some really interesting themes. The main character is Ike, who you would know from Smash Bros. And Ike is a great stand-in for the player in a way that he is his own person, but the player can feel the sort of path he's feeling. It's also a great place to start, although of course it is difficult to acquire.
Now we're on to game 4 in the West. This is Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn.
This is my favorite game in the series.
Whoa!
Hot take? I don't know. If you are new to this series, do not start with this game. 1, it's a direct sequel to Path of Radiance. The story, you'll be losing some of the...
There's some continuity issues there.
Richness of the world. But also, there was this interesting thing that happened where the Japanese translation said normal, hard, maniac for the difficulty settings. But when they brought it to the West, they made it easy, medium, hard. Medium to us was hard mode in Japan. Hard mode to us was maniac mode in Japan. When you play normal mode, you feel like it's crushing difficulty if you're not familiar with the series.
Okay.
And that game did not sell because of that.
So if you're new to the series and you start with easy mode, you aren't a chicken, you're just playing the normal way to play the game.
Only for this one.
Otherwise, why even playing video games?
That's true. Yeah.
Loser. Next up, we've got on the Nintendo DS, Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon.
This is a reimagining of the very first game in the series, Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light. This is the first time in the West we got Marth's story, and Marth is considered the mascot of Fire Emblem.
What would you say is Marth's existential dilemma he's working through to better his life and find meaning in what he does?
I don't even know how to answer that. The gameplay on this one is much simpler than the previous ones. Mm-hmm. It's also a decent place to start. Fans generally don't like how the graphics look on the DS. It's not retro in a fun way. It looks more muddy. I think it's a perfectly fine place to start.
So next in the West, we get Fire Emblem on the 3DS, and I feel like this is when it explodes into the West's consciousness for this series. But there's actually a game that came out between the DS release and this game. What game is that?
Fire Emblem New Mystery of the Emblem. It's a sequel to Shadow Dragon. The thing is, Shadow Dragon sold really poorly in the West. Intelligent System decided to just bring the series back to Japan for New Mystery of the Emblem. It's a really important game in the series for what Intelligent Systems decided to do with some of the big gameplay decisions, but we never got it. We don't have it.
To this point, when we get to Fire Emblem Awakening, how is the gameplay evolving?
Up until Awakening, there's a pretty consistent gameplay throughout. And Awakening does a couple bigger things to change things up. Even through Awakening, there's a through line that you can see through it all. And I think that's part of the appeal of the series, is that you're constantly getting new elements and new twists on things you're familiar with,
right.
but you always kind of know what to expect. Another note about Awakening, and this kind of speaks to why you feel like after Awakening, there's just Fire Emblem everywhere. The story goes that Nintendo went to Intelligent Systems and said, if your next game doesn't sell at least 250,000 copies, this series is over. The games had not sold well for a few entries in a row, and the series is on the brink, and this game sold millions of copies. In the fan base, we all say it saved the franchise. Not only did it save the franchise, I feel like it really exploded the franchise in a way that makes sense that you feel the way you do as an outsider, of like, all of a sudden this series is everywhere. This game does two really big things, I would say. The first is you have a playable kind of avatar character.
Mm-hmm. Like James Cameron's Avatar?
Yeah, you get a Navi to play as.
So weird.
You also get the introduction of what's called casual mode. And casual mode is permadeath turned off. When your unit dies, they come back on the next map. And that was a pretty big change when this game came out.
Which, I don't know if you know this, but in the US they call it Mort mode.
What? Was that because you're a filthy casual, Mort?
I don't care. Now, for all you collectors out there, one of the cool things is that when Fire Emblem Awakening came out, it came out with this special edition 3DS, which is beautiful, but it's the original 3DS. It's not like an XL or the new 3DS. Now this series has sold millions of copies. Nintendo's on a tear with this thing. Intelligent Systems is on a tear. So they release Fire Emblem Fates. I have here the special edition. You can watch my game hunting video. This link is in the description below, where my buddy Michael over at the swap meet, one of the vendors, sold this to me for just a bargain bin price. Before we talk about the gameplay itself, for you collectors out there, what's interesting about this is not only are the little special goodies that are inside the game, but the actual game itself is this one, which has the cover of both games on it, and it also comes with both games on a single cartridge, which is noted by this black and white difference here. And there's also downloadable content on this that you can't get anywhere.
There's actually a third one too, called Revelation, and your special cartridge is one of the few ways you can still get it, which is part of why this is so collectible, I imagine.
Yes.
Fates became this really ambitious game after the success of Awakening, where I just feel like they turned Awakening up to 11. Conquest is designed as this particularly like hardcore tactical experience. For the longtime fans, it tends to be one of their favorite games in the series. Birthright is imagined as a more beginner-friendly experience. A couple of the main characters are just really overpowered. It's centered around your avatar character's decision to side with their blood family or with the family who raised them, and the entire narrative unfolds from there.
Do you think that, in your opinion, the Fire Emblem games tell good stories, at least as far as video game standards are concerned?
I'd say a good number of them. For the length of gameplay...
They're not Chrono Triggers?
I mean, what is Chrono Trigger?
Yeah.
It's so good. The older games tend to be less tropey. The newer ones are a little more tropey.
Yeah.
Fates, in particular, is understood, maybe charitably, as telling a good story badly. The older ones tend to be a little more tight, and some of the Japanese exclusive ones before we ever got are beloved for the stories they tell.
One other collector's note is that when Fire Emblem Fates came out, that was when the new Nintendo 3DS XL was here, and this is the most powerful and most feature-stacked version of this console, and there is this Fire Emblem Fates edition of it, probably one of my favorite consoles I own outside of the Zelda ones. This has become quite collectible as well, and is pretty tough to find, especially in box. What is this game? Because these people look like they're 10.
Boy. This game is awesome, is what it is. This is probably the best presentation in the series. It's the first time we got voice acting. The art style is wonderful. It's actually a remake of the second game in the series. In the West, we just call it Fire Emblem Gaiden. It was a Japan exclusive. And it's set adjacent to Marth's story in the first game. I didn't think I would like it when I played it, and it's now one of my favorites.
What makes it your favorite?
Because it's a very faithful remake of an NES game. It's a tremendously simple game in a lot of ways.
Was it simple that you would recommend people start with this game?
I think you could.
You keep going back to the Game Boy Advance ones because the tutorials are so strong.
The tutorials are so strong, and that's what I started with. There's that nostalgia
A little
for
bias,
me.
yeah.
Yeah, I'll admit that.
So the series is cooking on the 3DS. The games are selling great. You're getting more love with the Smash Brothers. Now we get the Nintendo Switch. Everyone's expecting a new Fire Emblem game to come out, and we got a doozy of a game. This is Fire Emblem Three Houses.
This is the most ambitious game Intelligent Systems has ever made. There are 4 routes you can take through the story. This is going to be the most complex, all of the RPG things that sometimes can be tough for you game in the series. There's all these stats you can level up. There's relationships you can have. Some of the maps are just like unbelievably built. There's this full animation for everything that I think looks amazing.
The opening and the continuing animation looks like a really well done, TV show or, film. The cinematography is great. The art style is great. And it's voice acted really well, I think, too.
Oh, yeah. It's probably the most accessible in terms of just easy to find game in the series.
Yeah. But there's complexity in this game that can be a turnoff to folks, and it's maybe not indicative of the rest of the series.
I would say so, yeah.
So that's what we're up to right now in terms of mainline games in the series. And Fire Emblem Engage just got announced. I don't think we know anything at this point about the gameplay or anything, but we just know that it's a mainline entry into the series. As a Fire Emblem, just huge fan, what do you think from what you've seen so far?
I'm really excited. It looks like a return to a little more of the classic gameplay. Three Houses took a different direction in a way that I appreciate. Engage looks a little more like what we've come to expect. I would say the one downside so far is that the main character looks like a toothpaste label with the red and blue. But that's not a big deal.
Fire Emblem is so popular that there's actually not just these mainline games in the series, there's a couple of other games in the series that do a little bit of different things with the formula. The first is Fire Emblem Warriors, which any game that is with the subtitle Warriors, like Hyrule Warriors, Fire Emblem Warriors, Dragon Quest Warriors, those are games that are the Dynasty Warriors template of gameplay. I believe it's called Muso. What those games are is you feeling super powerful. You go out on the battlefield and you swing your sword, and within one swipe you kill 50 enemies, at a time or more. And it also came out on the 3DS. Of note, this only works if you're playing it on the new Nintendo 3DS console because it has a little bit more power. But the Nintendo Switch version is probably, if not certainly, the definitive way to play this game because of the extra horsepower that it can do. Have you played these games?
Truthfully, no.
No, and do you have any interest in them?
No, I feel like with the Warriors games, I'm a once every 3 years kind of person.
Yeah.
And I'm on the Hyrule Warriors rhythm. And so after one of those, I'm like, all right, I'm good. And then another one comes out, and I get that itch again, but I guess I'll just do Hyrule Warriors.
Yeah, I like the Warriors games in theory. In spite of how much action is there, it's oddly relaxing because you feel all of that power. There's some stress in terms of telling your units to go over there, to go there, and there's some strategy components involved, and I know it can go really deep. I'm the same as you. I think I am drawn to this about as much as how Japanese audiences are stereotyped as being drawn to first-person shooters. Like, sure, but it's not my favorite. But I did want to add these to my collection just because it's Fire Emblem, and first-party Nintendo is going to be a must-get every time. There's also a sequel to this game that just came out, but I don't have that game at this time. I presume it's more of the same, but you can comment below and tell me how different it actually is. Now, though we went from the Nintendo Wii to the Wii U, and we didn't see a mainline entry, we got Tokyo Mirage Sessions #FE or #FE or #FE. This is a game that is a Fire Emblem game in a way. Have you played this before?
No, that one's pretty out there even for me.
Yeah, I've actually not played very much of this game. It's a bit like Fire Emblem Dancing with the Stars, combination, which that would be a great game. Dancing with the Stars, but with like Nintendo characters. No, that would be a terrible game. No one would want to play that.
I'd play it.
I bought this right when it came out because I was like, I know that this is so bizarre that it's just not going to do well, and yet it's remained affordable, and it got ported to the Nintendo Switch as well, so it's pretty easy to find this one and pick it up and give it a playthrough. It reviewed good, and it's supposed to be a fun game, but just about as bizarre and fun and colorful as you could expect, while weirdly incorporating Fire Emblem characters. Of all of the games that we discussed today, what would you say is just the most satisfying game of all of them that you've played in the series?
I think for me, the most satisfying one is my favorite one, the one I mentioned earlier, which is Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn on the Wii. I love its grand story. I love its challenging gameplay. I love that it tells the story that it tells through multiple perspectives. It leans into some ambiguity in a way that I think is really interesting, but without being edgy or gritty just for the sake of it.
Yeah. Are there any games in this series that you've played multiple times?
Everyone that I've played, I think I've played multiple times.
Are there any that you're okay with if you never play again?
I will probably never play Shadow Dragon again. I beat 3 out of the 4 Three Houses routes, and I'm not super interested in doing the 4th.
About how many hours of gameplay did it take you to go through all of that?
I think like 150.
Okay, so about a 50-hour campaign. Even if you're paying $200 for one of these games, which is an insane amount to spend on a game, getting 200 hours of entertainment out of a game potentially is substantial. Which 3DS game of all of them would you say is the most fun?
I think most people will enjoy Awakening and have the most fun with it. There's so much customizability to it. There's so many decisions you can make. Once you kind of figure out what you're doing, you can actually really break the game, which I think people really enjoy doing.
Like they throw it on the ground and like smush it with their foot, or like when you say break it, what do you mean?
Yeah, I think literally like snapping the cartridge
It
in
has
half.
the easiest snappable plastic of any game in the series.
That's what I would say. The 3DS entry I had the most fun with was Echoes, Shadows of Valentia.
Yeah.
People would really enjoy that, but it is a more classic experience for better and for worse.
What would you say is the most challenging game to go back to in terms of just gameplay difficulty?
Fate's Conquest is going to be the most difficult that we have here. A couple of the Japanese exclusive games before they were ever brought over to the West are notorious for their difficulty for players, especially who've never played before.
Of all of the games in the Fire Emblem series, which one have you played the most outside of the 3 campaigns in Three Houses?
Probably the Sacred Stones. That's the first one I got.
How many times have you played it through?
Probably 5 or 6.
Okay.
It's pretty quick, which is nice, but there's 2 sort of routes you can take, so
cool.
there's some replayability, and I just love that game.
Matt, this was highly informative. I hope that you learned something about the Fire Emblem series. Thank you for coming on the channel again.
Mort, it's an honor every time. I can't wait to be back.
I'm going to have you back on. We've got some other video ideas planned that are going to be a lot of fun, and I love you, bro.
Love you too, bro.
May the Force be with you, and with your spirit as well.
Indeed.